Any questions before we get started?
I don't think so. No, I've never done this before, so we'll see how this goes.
That's all right. Yeah. Well, it'll be nice and easy. The 5 Elements of Letting Go, the podcast. Discussing mental health openly and freely, and learning tools and techniques to find peace. So welcome everyone to the 5 Elements of Letting Go. I'm Dr. Jared McCollum, and my guest today is Michelle Traxel. We met
years ago.
Over 10 years ago, probably.
Yeah.
When your mom was working in the same clinic I was.
Yeah.
And we were looking for extra help at the desk, and I think that's what they'd interviewed you, Dr.
No, I think that was my other sister.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I get it.
We look very similar.
Okay.
But I'm the dirtbag with tattoos, and she's like the normal one. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent.
But I did meet you at pretty much the same time. Like,
Probably.
We're very interchangeable. So,
okay. More recently, probably in the last, how long has Little Fast and Fresh been open?
just about 3 years. It'll be 3 years this April, so 2 3/4 kind of thing.
So a little bit more, connected in the last 3 years. Little Fast and Fresh is a little restaurant here in town that does mainly takeout. You can you even sit in anymore?
We have 2 seats inside.
Yeah.
We have a patio. That's going to come to an end pretty quick here.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're primarily takeout.
Okay. Yeah. And it's like whole food, delicious, locally sourced kind of thing.
Just real food.
Yeah.
That was the whole concept, like real food fast.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. One of the other reasons I invited you here is just because I think you're a fascinating person.
Oh, well, thank you.
And you always have very interesting things to say and share. And you're not afraid to speak your mind.
Oh, boy.
So that's one of the
really
reasons.
Sorry, honey.
Are you guys worried you're going to get in trouble now?
No. Yes. Yeah. I'm used to it.
You're going to be fine.
Yep.
Okay. So anyway, the main purpose of the podcast is we're talking about mental health. And, I like to start off with where do you see and how do you see the state of mental health within our community, Canada, the world as a whole?
Pre-COVID, I thought it was pretty terrible. Post-COVID, I think it's extra terrible, but in a weird way, I feel like we're being more aware of it. And now a new conversation is happening where, before we wouldn't really openly address it. It was kind of this forever hidden secret of where everyone was in the spectrum, and you were a wuss or a crybaby or, just buck up. It's not that bad. And now we're all kind of like, oh, it is bad. And we're at least recognizing it, but I still think we have a really, really long way to go.
Yeah, I think, they're making it a focus. And even those that, may have made fun of people with mental health issues before, now they're using it as the reason to put kids back in school and fix things because they're concerned about everyone's mental health all of a sudden. Yeah,
and I feel like there's a duality to that because I feel like on one side, it's great that we're addressing that and we're aware of that, but I also kind of feel like people are using that as a little bit of a scapegoat. So instead of kind of having tough decisions and being open and honest, we're just kind of blanketing it as this, oh, the kids' health, the kids' mental health, we gotta crush it in. So I think it's a slippery slope as far as that's concerned of addressing everyone's mental health. But I've been a really big advocate for quite a while of, senior engagement and addressing seniors' homes and kind of that void that new moms experience where they get kind of locked in their homes. And so my real hope is that we all start to look at that because we all did go stir crazy when we were literally locked in our homes. So I hope that we can look at it, but I have noticed it's become like a political tagline a little bit of get everybody back out to protect
Yeah.
their mental health. So,
Yeah. Well, it's the new label that
Yeah.
they're using rather than just saying, I just want what I want.
yeah.
Just give me what I want.
Yeah.
This is the label I'll use so it
Yeah.
sounds, snowflake enough that they'll listen to me.
Yeah, like there's some weird kind of moment that's happening with it. And I do think it's good that it's at least, in media, but I just don't want to see it spin doctored to the point that we're kind of like worse off than we were previous. So,
Yeah. When there's always that difficulty of when you slide to one end, we're always at this end of mental health where we're not even talking about it. Now,
yeah.
everyone, like we had a previous guest that her concern is a lot of people think, they're confusing anxiety with anxiety syndrome.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
That's a really, really good point. And I feel like that's kind of happening is almost like every little worry is becoming a diagnosis. And you saw it and you see it still in kind of modern medicine, Western medicine, where every little thing could potentially be fixed. And, and I feel like that's kind of happening to mental health right now. It's like I'm anxious, so therefore I must have anxiety syndrome, or I'm, concerned and I worry, or I insert whatever kind of minor neurosis you want, and we slap a label, a mental health label on it.
Yeah.
So, but that being said, I think we had to go to that place where we didn't talk about it, and now we're overly talking about it, and hopefully we find that back to balance, that back to center. So
I think it's the same thing with emotion, where 20 years ago you didn't share your emotions.
Totally.
It was a negative thing.
Yep.
To what reality TV has done for emotions,
Yeah.
where now everyone is extremely emotional, and where their excuse is, well, I just got emotional. And then, it's like what we use alcohol as an escape, saying that, well, I behaved that way because of alcohol. Well, I behaved this way because I was emotional.
Yeah.
Rather than, like with anything, it swings from one extreme to another, and eventually, hopefully, we find ourselves in the middle where we can respect it properly.
Yeah, and I think it's a huge learning curve. Like I know, you look at your whole spectrum of your family, each generation treats it very differently than the previous generation. And I kind of noticed it going up and down, and one generation will know a lot more about mental health than the next generation, and then it does that weird roller coaster thing. So we'll see. We'll see how this kind of all comes out and what happens now.
I'm just grateful. It's, like you said, it's a good discussion, and it's something that we're actually talking about and how it affects everyone.
Absolutely.
And, hopefully we'll, and again, any opportunity we have to talk more about mental health and getting people to share how they're actually feeling,
absolutely.
we're going to save lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's good. So, in a way, one thing, I thought we could talk about is because we're both small business owners and just the stress of going through COVID. What were those first couple of weeks like for you?
I think so. We shut down for kind of a bunch of reasons. We had a number of staff who were immune compromised or caring for someone who's immune compromised. We had an immune compromised daughter. A few of our farms went offline, so we couldn't get product, and it was just kind of that perfect storm. And in the first kind of 3 weeks, I just felt so out of control. I felt like there was nothing that I could do to fix it or solve it or anything. I felt like a failure because I saw all these other businesses kind of trudging through it and trying to figure out how to keep going, how to put one foot in front of the other, and we just couldn't. And I was like, how come they can do it and we're not? And we're pretty we don't quit.
Yeah.
So the fact that we threw in the towel was pretty shocking for me, I think. And trying to place that sense of failure and then still get up and teach my kids and cook dinner. And I wanted to mourn this huge loss, but I kind of couldn't because I still needed to solve the problems and pay the bills and find money and negotiate terms and figure out what was going to happen, over the course of what we originally thought was going to be 3 weeks, a month, and then maybe 2 months. And then even getting back to it, we couldn't get back kind of full scale. Like I'm sure you didn't get to just jump back into the business you used to be. So then you're trying to become a whole new entity. So I think just like lost and a little flustered and a little over it. Like there was definitely moments where I was like, could we just bail? Like, do we have to keep going?
I thought about that a couple times. I'll be honest, you know, where you're like,
you're like,
okay, I guess I got to start. If I've got to start over, I'll do something different.
Like what other marketable skills do I have? And it was a journey, and it's not done by any way, shape, or form. And I feel like all of us are. The one kind of thing that I held on to was the fact that all of us were going through it. So, like, we even had to close part of our business because we had 2 locations and we shut one down. And I think, like, in a normal journey of business ownership, that would have been just like a massive loss. Like, I would have really felt that. But instead, it felt more like solving problems and moving forward and shifting and changing. And so it was weird. Like, you would think you would have one reaction to a situation, but then what actually came to be was so different that you're like, I don't get it. Yeah. But you just,
There's so many things going on and hitting us from so many different directions. You weren't sure what to feel anymore.
Yeah. But
I just know those, we had to shut down quite abruptly because we had, at the beginning it was the choice of practitioners. If you want to stay open and take care of your patients, you're welcome to stay open. We recommend those that, can't create the distance. If their waiting rooms are too busy or, things like that, then maybe they should close. But we're set up pretty good for that. It's just our clinic. No one else is running, So we felt very confident that, okay, we can continue and provide good care. And all of a sudden I got an email that said, nope, you can't work anymore. And so we had to cancel all our patients and just shut the door. And it was weird. And, you go through that part of, I try to be very careful to try not let my work become my identity.
Totally.
But there's that part of you
that's identified as that.
Because not only, would I lose a career that I love, but we have a pretty big community.
100%.
Just like you guys do. Like your clients
all the time.
Adore you guys and
exactly.
Are there almost multiple times a week.
Well, we had people that came multiple times a day, and we even had that senior community where like we were their connection. And part of the reason why we shut down too is we got a warning because we took all the chairs out, we took all the seating out. We were like, get in, get out. Like you can't hang out here. And people were congregating in the front. They were standing around and eating. They were hanging out front. And at one point in time, we had like 75 people between outside and inside, just like commiserating how sad and nervous and scared they were. And there's not a great way to be like, we love you, we support you, we're here for your journey, get the F out. Like, it's not a doable thing. So we had to have that, like, what could we do? And we kept trying to, encourage that of like, please just grab your stuff and leave. And it just wasn't working. And had to shut the doors, and it sucked. And knowing that those people, that our community, we just took away their last safe space. So, and for you, like, you make people feel better. When I come to see you, it's because I don't feel good, and I know that we're going to have this experience, and then I'm going to leave, and I'm going to feel better, and the next day I'm going to feel better, and the next day I'm going to feel better. And you had to take that away. It was particularly tough on those patients that had mental health issues. Totally.
Because, some days, there's so many other scary things in your mind that you don't think about it. And then some days you're like, oh, crap, I wonder how so-and-so's doing.
100%.
They're going to be not in a great place right now. If I'm not in a good place,
100%.
They're in a rough place. So, it was hard to be there.
Yeah, and to just pretend like everything was good when really all you wanted to do is like cry in the shower. But you have to keep going. So for some people, I talked to someone kind of post-COVID, and they were like, I loved it. it was the best time of my life. I reconnected with myself. I feel great. I'm like, I am so happy for you, but also so jealous because I did not have that experience in the slightest. But like, you go. I'm very proud of you.
Well, it's interesting too. I noticed, after the first 3 weeks, those, and I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but those that were extroverts
Totally.
had the hardest time with it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And they're the ones that swung most to the, conspiracy.
Totally.
But just because it confirmed what they needed.
Totally.
And we grasp on things and ideas that give us what we need. Mm-hmm. And so I don't judge them because I know why.
I agree.
They're going for those things.
And you could kind of like watch it happening.
Yes.
Like I try really hard to avoid social media because I have to be on it enough for business, and I'm a feisty person, and it's just a perfect storm.
Yeah.
But you can literally like watch them not be okay. Like you could see the grasp on it just kind of like slowly shifting.
Yeah.
And that was super interesting to watch. And I for myself, I feel like I identify as this bizarre, like, extrovert introvert because I'm extroverted when I need to be, but I am so happy to sit on the couch and knit a hat and, like, not talk for 6 hours.
Yeah.
So it was this really weird kind of place to be of like, and I really thrive off connecting with people and being a part of community, but I had to really distance myself from reaching out to people because I take on everybody else's stuff and I try and solve problems, and it was a perfect COVID storm.
Yeah. I found that I had to, I trusted that whatever was going to happen was going to work out.
Yeah.
Because I always believe that, and I really try to make that my philosophy. So through that, I had to really practice on just letting go of worrying about everyone and, rushing back to work because I had no power over it.
Yep.
So, you have to focus on the things you have power over, which is how am I going to take care of myself, my family?
Yep.
What am I going to do today to feel okay?
Yeah, 100%. And not get stuck in the, like, COVID competition. I did notice there was this bizarre, and I don't know if it was the extrovert people who just needed something to do and, like, something to hold on to, but there was that, like, I baked 16 loaves of bread and did 19 loads of laundry, and I'm organizing my entire house, and it's only Tuesday. And then I'm like, I put on real pants this week. So you had to kind of find your new normal and whatever kind of worked.
Yeah. It irritated me a little seeing all those posts of what an opportunity to learn a new language or to
100%.
get a new skill. Or,
like, can we just be sad?
Yes.
Can we just, like, wallow a little bit?
More than anything, we needed that time to do nothing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I know for the first 30 days, I didn't do anything.
I know. Yeah.
I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And I had never...
not done stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, for me, I worked every day since I was 10.
Yeah.
Like delivering papers. You got to get up early every morning.
Totally.
I did that every day. And then, I've worked, like I remember, I think I did like a 3-year period here at the clinic where I never went on a holiday. But, yeah. And partly that's because I didn't want to go on a holiday with my ex-wife. But at the same time, I've gotten better at taking time away. Yeah. But even with that, I've never had more than 10 days off in a row.
Totally.
In 30 years.
That was our life too.
Yeah. So to have all that time and then thinking I'm going back in, phase 1, we thought we'd be,
totally.
But they missed acupuncturists on the list. And rather than, apologizing and throwing us on the list, they just said, you'll come in next phase. So that gave us another 3 weeks, I think it was.
Yeah.
And, it was good. Those last 3 weeks I got, that's when I finally started doing things.
You're like, oh, the time's coming to an end. Yeah. Got to figure this out.
Yeah. When you finally have a date.
Yeah. Did you notice though, like, are you approaching it differently now?
Yeah. I don't work as many hours.
Yep.
partly that is because I didn't expect it to be terribly busy. But initially, I could have seen more patients for that first month.
Yeah.
But I stuck to my guns because, you don't know. And we may add some more here when the fall starts as it gets busier. But I like this new setup and, because you have to, you say no to a lot more things you were doing before and you're keeping it a little more simple and, works for me.
Yeah.
And I think we're all doing less, we're not, especially socially, we're not trying to get as many things done. And
the ridiculous overdue. That's something I've noticed with the business, but also just being a mom, because I feel like even the way that I was parenting pre-COVID, I'm like, man, we were always on the go. Like, life was chaos. And now I'm like, you won't die if we don't do something on Wednesday night, and just kind of dialing it back. But we approach the business the same way too, because Jared and I have both been in industry our whole careers, our whole life. We worked in some type of food service. And even in high school, I would work the overnight shift at McDonald's and then go to school all day and then sleep for a few hours and then go work the overnight shift from like grade 10 to grade 12. So I've never really been a person to stop. And now going back to it, I don't think we'll ever go back to the scale we were before. And weirdly enough, our walk-in sales, our day-to-day sales, same amount of money, one less day a week. Because before we were open 6 days, now we're open 5 days. We're missing kind of elements of the business because we used to do huge caterings and massive events and that kind of stuff. So, but it was really interesting to see how unneeded that extra kind of grind was. And we shortened our hours because we used to be open 12 hours a day. Now we're open 8 hours a day. Yeah. Just like paused for a second and reevaluated and rethought it. And, you get the people who are like, well, why aren't you doing this? Or why aren't you doing that? And it's like, we just can't. We're just going to say no. We're just going to stick to our guns. Yeah. And
we don't want to.
Yeah, we're really tired. We're very sleepy. But it's been interesting to see, A, that we feel confident enough to do that, but B, people are kind of understanding now. And, if you run out of something, it's not the end of the world. Whereas before, you'd get like an instantly terrible review and you'd kind of carry all that stress. So, I don't know. I hope that that's a piece of COVID that sticks around, that kind of understanding.
Yeah. I do think people are far more kind and
like mostly, like asterisks of mostly.
Well, and I think, the stuff we see it was always there.
Yeah, it's
We're just
now,
seeing,
it's just
now people are pushing it more.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's because it's getting views or people, want it or expect it. So because that's, one thing, one book I read during COVID was Humanity, I think it's called. And it's written by a Swedish historian. And it goes through and he points out like about a dozen of the examples that we've used for the last 100 years of, humans are garbage and without civilization and leaders and religion, they'd be garbage and it would just be all absolute chaos, right? And he goes through all those points and shows that they were all a lie.
100%.
One of the ones was The Lord of the Flies, right? We all are expected to read it and watch the show when we're in junior high. And it was written by a teacher who was an alcoholic and he beat his kids.
Perfect.
He hated being a teacher.
Yeah.
He did never like children.
Quality human.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is how he perceived youth and kids. Yeah. So he wrote this book to share how he felt about kids.
Yeah.
And turns out that, so the author is just like, there has to be a time where this happened. What did they do? And he scoured through records all over the world and he found a story of these 6 young men who were from an island in Tonga area.
Yeah.
And they had decided they wanted some adventure and wanted to get away. So they were going to take a boat to New Zealand. And they didn't know how to sail. They didn't know how to do anything, these kids. They steal the town's drunk's boat. All fell asleep one night, so they lost direction and ended up, crashing on this sort of kind of rocky island. And they lived there for 18 months.
And let me guess, they were okay.
Yes. Yeah. They had a rule that if anyone ever fought, they had to go to opposite side of the island
and
for 4 hours and cool off. And they had this amazing little organization. And
so no cannibalism, no rape, no abuse, no.
None.
Oh, weird. They all wanted to just live and survive.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And even one of the most famous examples we hear of is that Stanford prison experiment, which was the professor hired this guy to help him create the outcome he wanted, and they manipulated the whole thing.
Yeah.
They kept telling the guards to treat the kids, people this way and to do this. None of them wanted to do it.
Yeah, but they were forced.
Yeah, and even the guy that's screaming and crying in the video that they talk about, he wanted to leave, and they wouldn't let him leave unless they said, "Oh, you have to have a nervous breakdown to get out." So he faked one to try to get. So we have all these instances where, I don't know if it's people in leadership or just people, or it's a religious thing, this concept that we're born sinners and we're evil and we need to be controlled by someone in power to keep us
subservient.
Yeah.
I think it's power play. I think that's something that's been kind of exposed is I think a lot of our mental strain is from power being pushed down onto us. And I don't know if it's just because I've worked in a service industry where I'm treated as a servant since I was, 10, 11 years old. I was born in a bar, my parents had a bar, grew up there, all that kind of stuff. It's something that I've been exposed to my entire life. And you see people change because they have that weird position of power and they kind of become jerks as they kind of climb that ladder and they inflict their power on other people. And then you start to see those dynamics and see how people treat those they view less than. And now everybody was kind of forced to be on a level playing field. And we started to realize we actually need sanitation workers and the people who clean the hospital and, the people who serve your food and the people who go do those kind of unsexy jobs became the backbone of our entire society. So I think a lot of the mental health crisis right now is this massive power void where people don't know what's real, what's right, or who's in charge truly. And they feel weird. They feel really, really lost because they don't know how to control their power or harness their own power. So it's that weird, I don't know, and maybe just being small business owners, it's something that we've had to address time and time again. You have to figure out how to be a leader. You have to figure out how to lift people up. And it takes time. It's a skill set that needs to develop. But now you don't have a boss. Yeah. There is no boss right now. And there's a big void.
Yeah. Well, especially with those frontline workers that were given a raise.
Totally.
And COVID wasn't even over. And then they took it away.
Took it away. Yeah.
So here they're being told, you're important, you're needed, what you're doing is so amazing, we're going to give you a raise. And $2 to them
is a game changer.
A lot of money.
Yeah.
When usually their raise is 25 cents a year.
If that, yeah.
So now they feel like they're finally being respected and, I'm doing this dangerous job.
Yeah.
Being out there taking care of everyone, making sure they have what they need to survive, and then they steal it from them.
Yeah.
And I think the other aspect that's really setting people off, and maybe it's not even a conscious thing, but, we all know we're suffering. Things are difficult. Things aren't at the level they were, but yet the stock market is the best it's been in ages. Yeah. Bezos and buddies are making
billions of dollars.
Billions of dollars through this whole thing. Yeah. And, I think people are waking up to thinking that's not balanced.
100%. 100%. And I think everyone's feeling that imbalance. And so before I feel like a lot of people live life almost on autopilot and kind of a zombie to what was emotionally happening around them. And now they're hyper aware. It's like everybody turned on their empathy simultaneously. And, you know, this person who at one point in time had this high level, insert whatever job you want here, they have the same worries, concerns, and frustrations that, you know, like a server does. And we're all having this weird reevaluation, I guess.
And I think too, there was that, you know, I think people always saw there's the bottom rung of, you know, the working poor and the poor.
Totally.
Then there was the middle class who think any day now they're going to be a millionaire.
Totally. Yep.
So they don't want to change the structure
because eventually they're
someday they're going to be that person.
Yep.
And then you have the 1% at the top.
Yep.
And I think once, you know, everyone, but that 1% felt super vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that, oh, maybe that's not ever a possibility for me. They had that time to think about it and review it all and just see that this whole thing's a big scam.
Absolutely.
And, you know,
I meant this whole thing, you mean life in general. Like, this isn't COVID's a scam. It's like, no, we all realize that we are being taken advantage of every day of our lives.
Yeah. In our, you know, like we've become very aware of many things throughout this, you know, systematic racism, you know, more people than ever are waking up and seeing it for a first time.
Yeah.
And I think too, the systematic, you know, economic control over everyone.
Oppression of everyone.
Yes, is very relevant and open to everyone now where they see, hang on, why are they profiting when everyone else is suffering?
Is failing.
And the profits that they made during that time could have solved every problem we have.
100%.
You know?
And also the only way that they made those profits were abusing people. You know, people started to realize that Amazon's work environment is unbelievably unsustainable and super terrible, and they could care less. You're a number that's filling a warehouse job, and if you complain, they'll replace you with another number. They don't care. But I think people are waking up to like labor violations, like huge labor violations. You know, there was a big struggle to try and not just in the U.S. Like, I think sometimes we talk about these problems and we assume they're American problems. But within food production in Canada, there was this huge issue of actually tracing outbreaks because we found out that processors were using one SIN number to represent more than one person. So then you couldn't accurately track who was who. You had, you know, whole families living together, 20 people deep in a house, and then those people are going out and they're working all of these kind of like deemed menial jobs, but suddenly we're shutting down Tim Hortons and 7-Eleven and all of these businesses because these people that we normally don't even think about are all living together and they've become this kind of like hotbed of this disease. And they can't afford to take a day off because they have a sniffle and then suddenly we have a pandemic. So
that's what I said right at the beginning. I said, you know, majority of these people can't
take
not
a day
work.
off.
So they're going to show up sick or healthy. And like they always have.
100%.
And because no one's buying in at the beginning.
100%.
You know, no one's going to give them a hard time.
100%. And something that really stuck with me was the fact that 3 Cargill employees from just outside of Okotoks died. And I just kept thinking, how would I feel if I found out that 3 of my coworkers died? Like, what emotional upheaval would that have? And the one woman, she had worked at Cargill for 25 years, never complained, was like the most incredible employee. And her job was to pick out bone fragments out of the ground meat product. But she did it with a smile. She did it every single day. And her doing that job allows you to buy ground beef on the cheap. But everybody, she became a punchline. She became this like almost a COVID joke. And we just moved right past it as if it didn't happen. And like, could you imagine if 3 people within your super tight network of, you know, even if it was just like a couple businesses around here, and 3 people on this block died. Like, how big of a void would that create?
If 3 people in Okotoks died from COVID,
100%.
people would be freaking out.
100%. But we just like shoved it to the back burner as if it didn't matter.
Yeah.
And
I think it also exposed that, what was it, 75-80% of all the meat production in Canada
it got shut down.
is done by one large
factory.
Corporation from the United States.
Yeah, 100%. And it's actually like, I could go down that rabbit hole so hard. And then there's been a lot of things that have happened from that. So, you had 2 plants shut down in Canada, and it represented 70% of all beef product that's processed within Canada. So massive beef shortage, huge issues within the beef market. The beef industry's been losing 12 jobs a day since 2012. Like, it's been failing since well before COVID. Then they take this massive hit. Well, then you had secondary processors who normally process fruits and vegetables who maybe did a little shady deal, or because there was such a deficit, got kind of strong-armed into packing, and then magically onions had salmonella. So stuff...
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So stuff that...
So all those onions that were coming from California...
Yeah. Well, it was actually 12 farms that were kind of through the Washington area, and they were being packed just this side of the border. But it was like hundreds and hundreds of pounds, and then maybe 3 weeks later, peaches.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So
I had no idea.
And salmonella is a protein based illness. It doesn't fucking happen on onions. Sorry, I'm swearing. But like stuff like that. So, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that because they haven't adjusted for those labor shortages. They're still having huge problems. They figured out how unsanitary the working conditions were because they had everybody just cram-packed in a space. So they haven't figured out how to adjust for that. But I think a lot of the mental health stuff that's happening now is these things that we all experience were stuff that Canadians have never experienced. We've never experienced food shortages. We go to the grocery store, the shelves are packed. So that mental image of walking into the grocery store and there's nothing, and people are in masks and gloves, and it looks like doomsday, and everyone's like yelling at each other and frantically buying toilet paper, and you're like, what is happening? Yeah. I think it really messed with us.
One of the hardest types of anxiety to deal with is uncertainty.
Totally.
Because at least with anxiety, you're like, you have an idea of what's going to happen. You're thinking of all the scenarios, but with uncertainty, there's no scenario to think about because we still have no idea where this is going.
Totally.
And there won't be a resolution within a year.
No.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I think, we're 6 months in and we are about to pop off. Like, I feel like what we've experienced so far has been the lead up to the bad time. Like, I feel like we're kind of cresting that other wave, and hopefully we all learned a lesson or two and we can cope a bit better this time. But I do have a lot of fear around what this is going to look like, what the next 4 months are going to look like. So, yeah.
Well, on that light note.
It's super fine. This is totally fine.
So, one of the things we like to talk about is, what you've been through and what kind of tools you've used in the past to help you, kind of find balance and deal with your own mental health.
Yeah.
So, what have you done in the past?
I've done a lot of counseling. So I had a lot of trauma as a youth. So I went through tons and tons of counseling, and even through my adulthood, every kind of major milestone within my development, I guess you want to say, I've reached out for counseling. And it's something that I will continue to do. It's something that I encourage absolutely everybody to do. I have a pretty firm philosophy of fix it before it's broken instead of waiting until it becomes so much more than you can kind of handle. So that's my approach.
Yeah.
I read a ton. I have a lot of things that, weird hobbies. I knit around the clock when I can. And it just lets me shut my brain off and reorganize. And one thing for me is, that the uncertainty is something that I do struggle with. So something that keeps my mental health on track is organization. So as long as I stay organized and have a task to focus on, then I'm good. And so I've figured out different ways. Like I know I have to have something kind of like a project on the go or something that I can jump into when everything starts to feel a little too much. But yeah, that's my kind of coping strategy. And also just general wellness. Like I try and make sure I move often, move constantly, get outside. I garden pretty much all summer. I have tons of plants inside. So I try and find things that keep me up, keep me moving, and keep me engaged. Because as soon as I become hyper sedentary, my mental health just absolutely plummets.
That's a big thing. And just about everything I've read on mental health is the importance of at least 20 minutes of cardiovascular every day.
Totally. Yeah.
And what it does to kind of settle the body. Another thing, that you mentioned there, with the knitting is, it is such a Zen practice.
It is.
Because, again, one big thing with Zen Buddhism is to turn everything into a Zen practice. So this idea of, being hyper-focused on whatever you're doing so that your focus is constantly on the moment.
Totally.
And so skills like knitting, where if your mind wanders off, you're going to mess up that whole hat or the socks or whatever.
Which I literally did before I came here. And I was like, what did I do?
Puzzling,
totally.
all these things that help. Like that's something we did a lot during COVID. We had a puzzle on the table constantly for 3 months.
That's super smart. Yeah.
And so everyone was kind of, when they just needed something to do and just
like
to distract themselves.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned in the last podcast about how anxiety is, an anxiety attack is a response from the fight or flight response that you trigger through your thoughts.
Yep.
And so your body is flooding with, all of this adrenaline, and it has to be released. Now you can be active to go and release that, like fighting or running.
Yeah, 100%.
But if you can't, you need to trust your body and allow this to work out.
Yep.
It's going to be in weird symptoms that you don't like.
Yep.
But if you can distract your mind and stay with your body and not fight it, it'll clear in 20, 25 minutes. And practices like knitting and, all those things, coloring,
drawing,
gardening, where you have something where, especially, and something that's fairly new is more challenging to the mind. And so you really have to be in that moment. If something becomes so easy that your mind can wander while you're doing it, it loses its power.
100%. 100%. Yeah, I think I'm actually about 86 years old. Because I'm like, give me a good romance audiobook and a Fair Isle sweater to knit, and I am a happy camper. Like, that's my happy place. But I think you have to have that thing that forces your mind to be in the now. Because we live so outside of ourselves. And I remember when we came to your seminar on your elements, and you were talking about, like we time travel a lot. We're never focused. And that's one thing, like as soon as my mind starts to go to all the problems that are bigger than the now, that's when I really, really struggle. And there are times that I have to, obviously as a business owner, you got to look at the books, you got to do your taxes, you got to worry about all that kind of stuff. But I have to find something else that brings me back to the moment. And when I don't do that, I become an a-hole. I will own that. And I just feel myself, snapping and not being okay and not being, and I can see it. I watch it happen. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oopsies. And then it's really hard to recover from that.
Because in your mind, you create this really stressful world that isn't reality.
Totally.
But because your mind is constantly in the future, in that space, you're always feeling anxiety, and you create the world based off this anxiety viewpoint.
Totally.
And it's only when you can get back into the moment where you realize, oh, things aren't as bad as they are. Like one of the best things we can do for ourselves is not watch or read the news for a while.
Totally. Like I said earlier, I had to stay off social media.
Yeah. And then you see, oh, I haven't had one person spit in my face or tear off my mask or,
Yeah,
or
100%.
do anything silly all week.
Yeah.
People were generally really nice. And
Yeah.
it's
To be fair,
okay.
I did get bawed at twice at Walmart yesterday. So
What's that?
like two, you can picture them in your mind, went bah and called me a sheep for wearing a mask at Walmart. So I'm annoyed that I was at Walmart.
I thought you were required to wear one there now.
Yeah, I thought so too, but apparently not. In all fairness, I think in the last 6 months, I avoid Walmart like the plague. Like this is not a sponsored video. I think, so the first time that I went, I saw a guy, like, they have a bunch of rules there now. Like, you have to wait at a blue line before you can start loading on the conveyor belt, and it's like 1% at a time. So she was still ringing my stuff in, and this guy tried to start, like, putting stuff on the conveyor belt. And she was like, sorry, sir, you got to wait. You know, I'll call you up when it's your turn.
Because they clean it before he comes up.
Yeah. And he just started losing it. And he's like, where's your mask? No. As he's wearing like a dirty single-use mask that's like down over just his mouth kind of thing. Like just keeping it real classy. And so they got into like a fight. And the lady was like, sir, if you are uncomfortable with me not wearing a mask, please go, somewhere else. I'm medically exempt. And he was like, yeah, right. And they started beaking at each other. And I was like, what is happening right now? So then he leaves. And I told the lady, I was like, don't let that ruin your day. Like, you're doing a really great job. And she started to, feel like she needed to justify why she can't wear a mask. And she's like, I'm trying to get transferred off the till because, I have breathing issues and PTSD. And as soon as I put it on, I get a really bad anxiety attack. And, like, I do believe and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, girl, I'm with you. I support you. Whatever you need. Like, what is going on right now?
But thank goodness you were that next patient.
100%.
Because she needed that right away.
100%. And we had a really good moment, but I was like, I hate the fact that this minimum wage worker just got treated like that and needed like a pep talk after the fact. And then I hate the fact, I hate that I didn't kind of jump in and tell the guy to kick rocks because he was just being ridiculous. But I was so overwhelmed by what was happening in front of me, I kind of couldn't believe it.
Well, and in that state, you were smart enough to know that if I get involved, this is going to escalate very quickly.
100%. I was like, I am too fiery to be nice right now. So then that was my one experience, and that was the only time I went to to Walmart during COVID, and then I had to go yesterday for something that nowhere else in town has. And like 7 minutes inside Walmart, two older men bawed at me like I was a sheep, and I was just like, I'm never coming back. I'm out. But I was thinking about, who is going to enforce that? Like, that is something, that mask law is so tumultuous. Who is the person that's going to be like, I'll stand at the door and yell at all those people and make sure that they're putting a mask on? Because I wouldn't do that job. I'd be like, I am a minimum wage employee. I can make $13 an hour sitting at home right now. Yeah. I ain't getting shot at Walmart. So, yeah.
It's, I know at No Frills they have someone sitting at a desk with free masks.
Yep.
And they're basically guarding anyone coming in.
Yeah. But what a terrible position to have to be in.
Well, and to force, I don't know who you have to do that.
Yeah.
The fact that unfortunately businesses have to.
You have to have that.
Quite honestly, those big businesses, I guess, they're not small market things, but I don't know if they have to have a security guard or.
Yeah, which is not a minimum wage
No,
job.
that's not.
And sorry, I'm so burpy. I ate so much food before I came here. But I had to be the person. So I worked at a company that rhymes with Warbucks for a really long time in Vancouver. And we used to have to kick out, homeless people and street people and panhandlers and all that kind of stuff. And there were some really dangerous moments. And I just kept being like, I am making, I think at the time it was like an $8 an hour job, working at midnight with people who were high out of their minds on who knows what. And I had to be like, excuse me, sir, could you stop peeing in the corner of this business and get out? And it was the worst. And I think that this trying to enforce masks would be worse than that experience. And I don't wish it on anybody.
Yeah. It's interesting. You've touched on a lot of points. It reminds me of, there's a book by Johann Hari. And is it 7? Oh, I'm trying to remember the title. I will put it in the description, everyone.
Okay.
But he wrote a book about depression, anxiety, mental health. And it was about, with himself, struggled with depression most of his life, depression, anxiety. And he, was told in his 20s, it's a chemical imbalance.
Totally.
So he started taking meds and, initially he felt better. And then over time, it wasn't working the same. Yeah. And then he'd have to switch medications and he was kind of on and off. And he's just like, there's got to be more to this picture, right? And so he's a journalist. He's written some pretty fascinating books. One about the drug war.
Oh, wow.
That's amazing. And but this particular one, he goes through and he lays it out that there's 7 things that we all need to feel balanced and have a healthy mental health. And none of them have to do with taking drugs.
Exactly, yeah.
And one of the common things is that we have a job where we feel we matter, that we give back in some way, and that we have some kind of autonomy within that job, that we feel we have control over how we help and what we can do. And, that we have some resolution on what we've done, where, I'm, blessed that I'm from the start to the end of that process of what I do at work. And at the end, there's this nice, rewarding result most of the time that people feel better. Yeah. And it's the same with you. You create this wonderful meal, people eat it, they love it, and they say thank you.
Yep.
Where a lot of people have jobs that are a little cog in those.
Huge machine.
And they never have any input on how it's done, and they never get the end result out of it. And not having those things in your life causes depression.
Yeah.
Because you feel what I do means nothing.
100%. And so I had a role of authority within that Warbucks company, and we had a retention. We had no retention. So we had a turnover rate of 150%. So we would have people who literally would go on their first break of their first day and be like, we're out. And we could not keep people because it was such a bad job. And it was terrible conditions. They would tend to move into neighborhoods that needed, never needed. They would go in and gentrify neighborhoods, but they would be the first cornerstone of gentrification of these neighborhoods. But these neighborhoods were unbelievably dangerous at that point in time. Like I remember setting up a store on Pender and Hastings in Vancouver, and we were told we had to be off the property by 9:15, and police would escort us back to the train station because it was that bad of an area. Goodness. People would OD in the parking lot and die, and you'd have to open the store late because it was a crime scene and stuff like that. And now it's beautiful, right? Like in quotations.
Of course now, those that worked, that work there have to live even further away. Yeah. Because they can't afford, because as they, gentrify the neighborhood and make it, bring up the quality, then people can't
live there.
That's like what's happened here in Okotoks.
100%. 100%.
There's not enough low-income housing, so 100%. People can afford to live here that do the jobs that most people don't want.
Like, I have memories from those experiences of, like, I got taught how to pick a lock so that I could break into the bathrooms to see the condition of the person who was in the bathroom who was ODing. Yeah. We had to take light bulbs out and put black lights in because you can't see veins. And the whole time we're doing all of this, like, how do we kick them out? How do we get rid of them? And I just kept being like, why
is this your decision?
Yeah, like, and where do they go if they're not here? And why are people feeling like they need this to survive every day? Like, why are they waking up in the morning and injecting themselves with something that could potentially kill them in a Starbucks bathroom? Like, what on earth is going on here? And I feel like I had a lot of PTSD kind of from that. Like, I watched people have to have their hearts restarted and then have to like jump on bar and make a latte and just compartmentalize it and try and deal with it later on as a minimum wage employee. And then it was like, here's $5. Like, there was never anything to support me through that.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm a pretty strong person, and I know the caliber of people that I also hired and brought on, who I feel like probably wake up with that to this day and struggle with that to this day. And in a lot of ways, we're like willingly giving ourselves these mental health crises and long-term effects just to try and have a meal. And we need to reevaluate that across the board.
Yeah.
And at least in kind of a service industry, it's still dynamic and you're moving, and there is that degree of, the good can outweigh the bad. And no one goes into it thinking that they're going to do it for the next 45 years. They go into it thinking it's to get me through college kind of thing. But then I think about the people who sit in a cubicle all day, every day with huge amounts of stress, that kind of office space phenomenon. And I think about how do they do it? How do they find their identity? How do they feel worthy? How do they get through the day? And then you hear, like, well, so-and-so only talks about this and there's all this drama. It's like, yeah, because they're bored and they have no worth and they have nothing to drive them.
Yeah, and if there's, no joy in your job, and I know a lot of people, they're paid in a salary. So they're not going to finish that job any faster.
Nope.
Because they're not paid well enough to do that.
Yeah, they're not rewarded for that.
They're like, well, if I do this too quickly, then I'm going to be given more work
100%
for what I'm being paid for. So they stagger this out and they fill in all that time with politics, office politics and
real politics
and other things, right?
And conspiracy theories.
Yeah. Rather than, and it's sad that has to be done to have their only way to fight back and honor their time and honor their hours. And
keep their brain going. Because otherwise you just turn into mush. Like, you watch it kind of happen and you see it. And then I kind of think about, if somebody's spending 8 hours a day at that job, maybe they're commuting an hour each way. That's 10 hours out of their day when they're up for maybe 14 to 16 hours. So they get 4 to 6 hours for themselves to do what? Like, they need to eat and shower and get groceries and raise their kids and pay their bills. So when do they have time to get outside of that?
Yeah. There was a survey that just came out recently where they were surveying white-collar jobs that got sent home to work. And even during COVID, they saw a 40% drop in depression and anxiety. Yeah.
And premature birth was another thing.
That one was so interesting. So I think there's two things behind that, one, of course, the less stress under the mother, right? To work right up until as far as she can. So that
in the comfort and safety of her own home. Yeah. Without trying to get to work, without all that extra headache, and she can wear those sweatpants right up until the end and she's not having to stress out about like nothing fits and I don't feel good. You're safe. You're in a really safe place.
And I think the other aspect to that was they didn't go to the hospital or to the doctor for every little small thing.
Totally.
Because they were discouraged to go to the hospital and people were afraid to go to the hospitals.
100%.
So what happened is they weren't going into the hospital more often. So doctors weren't panicking and they weren't inducing and forcing things that they shouldn't.
Totally.
And if they don't pick up on that other aspect of it, all these studies they've been done are it's just a waste of time because they'll blame it all on the mom because it's not just the mom who's stressed out that's causing these preemies.
Absolutely.
It's the system.
I had that experience. So I have 2 kids, 2 daughters. They're 7 and 4. Great mom. But I I had midwives for both of my pregnancies. And my first baby should have been an at-home, super easy birth. I was textbook. Like, we should have been so simple. My midwife came out super early because I called her and said, like, I'm in labor. It's a little bit overdue. She came out early because there was a snowstorm, and she happened to have been a cardiologist. And she heard a skip, like this really tiny little skip on the Doppler. My water hadn't broken, nothing. So in a traditional sense, I wouldn't have gone to the hospital until my water broke. And she was like, we're going to go. And I was like, no, I am having this baby here. She's like, you're not.
Which isn't her choice.
At all. And the fact that somebody who knew what my game plan was and who was my biggest ally the entire time was like, we need to leave. I instantly was like, okay, like, you know that I wanted this more than anything. And if you're saying, like, pack a bag, we're out. So we ended up having to go all the way to Rocky View because South was open. And by the time we got there, our daughter was flatlining. So she would have like one heartbeat, and then it would be just flat, and then another heartbeat, and then it would be super flat, and then like 6, and then flat. And my water still hadn't broke. So I would have been at home not knowing that my child was dying inside of me if it wasn't for my midwife. So we get there, crash C-section, resuscitate the baby. Everybody's good after that point. So my second baby, I had a really, really bad pregnancy with her, and I got really sick at 25 weeks, and she tried to my body tried to get rid of her, basically. And we were able to stop the labor and keep her cooking, but she was really engaged. So from that point on, I was just unbelievably miserable. And I went into active labor at 32 weeks, but my water didn't break. So I was walking around with contractions from 32 weeks till 40 weeks. But I had midwives who were like, if you can tough this out, you can keep cooking that baby. And I remember every week we'd go into the hospital to get a little bit of pain medicine so I could sleep and that kind of stuff. And every single time the obstetrician would be like, we can induce you. We can get this baby out. This pain will stop today. You can have this baby. And I'd be like, well, what's the risk to the baby? Well, they would probably need medical intervention. They might not have developed lungs. You know, you might have this issue, that issue, but you won't be in pain anymore. And my midwives would kick the OB out of the room, and then they'd be like, okay, let's regroup. On a scale of 1 to 10, which is worse, your kid not making it or these contractions that you're dealing with? And I made it all the way till 40 weeks because they kept being my ally. But watching that conversation, and it's the worst thing to say to somebody who's in pain and who's nervous and who's everything, of, we can make this stop. We can solve this problem. I would have had that premature baby. I would have had to have a second C-section, but because my midwives were like, calm down. If you can get through this, we will get through it with you, and really like advocated for that, I was able to have what I wanted and had a healthy baby. And I think this whole premature baby's not happening. I agree. I think a huge part of it is you take away that chaos and babies stay inside.
Well, and you know, we need that balance of the two.
Yeah, I agree.
Trusting a woman's body.
Yeah.
Trusting the birth process. That, you know, like I had a patient a few weeks back where, you know, she's 40 weeks and they're inducing her. Yeah. I'm like, why are they inducing you?
Yeah. And that's a really interesting thing. And so my first went about 10 days over, and I remember feeling like a failure when I hit my due date and my phone's blowing up and everyone's like, you having this baby today? Like, what's going on? And every single day.
Like, you know, these due dates magical. Are, you know, like, exact on every time.
And we're on vacation. Like, it's just this magic date circled in a calendar. And I felt like such a failure. Like, and every single day, it got to the point where I finally had to turn my phone off and like put it away because I would wake up to, is the baby coming yet? Are you having the baby yet? When's the baby coming? And then with my second one, I actually ended up having her on her due date. But again, my midwives, so I think with first baby, you have a different set of viewpoints. My second baby, they were like, it'll come sometime between like the first week in November and the third week in November. And I was like, okay. And people would ask, when are you due? And I'd say November. And they'd be like, November what? I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. Exactly.
Sometime in November.
And they really need to transition to that.
I agree.
More of a, window.
Yep.
A 2 to 3 week window.
Yep.
And trust, because what I don't get is what will happen if the baby stays in there for a while. Eventually,
it'll
the
come
body
out.
will get that baby out because it knows what to do.
And there is kind of this myth of 40 weeks because I know women who've had like a 36-week, 9.5 pounder. And she was like, if I friggin' went all the way to 40 weeks, that thing would have been 14 pounds.
Yeah.
Like, so super weird. And then I have another friend, 7-pound baby at 43 weeks. So it's the body does what it needs to do. The baby does what it needs to do. We're a team. We're figuring this out together. Yeah. But I try to be that really annoying friend when people are like, yeah, our baby's going to be born October 3rd. I'm like, ish. October 3rd-ish.
Yeah.
You do know you could easily go 2 weeks overdue. And they're like, what? And then they do go 2 weeks overdue. And they're like, I appreciate that you told me that like 3 months ahead of time because I'm mentally prepared for the fact that kid's not coming out. I'm like, yeah, we need to talk about that more.
That's one of the things that causes the most stress in our lives is these expectations and ideas of how things are supposed to be.
Yeah.
And when they don't work out,
we lose it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like what we're doing right now with COVID.
Totally.
Everyone's just like, but that's not how the world's supposed to work. And it's just like, I saw this great thing the other day that kind of put it into perspective. And it was talking about let's say, this woman who was born in 1900. Mm-hmm. So she's experienced,
all of it.
Everything, the Spanish flu, World War I, Spanish flu was like 3 years, dealing with World War I, and then the stock market crash, and the dirty 30s. Dirty 30s, all those things leading into, wars and,
and
multiple collapses. And all these things that lasted longer than 3 months, people.
100%. But I feel like we're like hyper focused on it because we have access to stuff that maybe is connecting us like a little too much in a lot of ways. Yeah. And
one of the things that as soon as I hear this, I get a little, do your research.
No.
I'm sorry, but Facebook is not research.
100%. YouTube, like I jokingly tell people are like, how'd you figure out how to build a website? I'm like, YouTube University. That's what YouTube's for, people. You ain't a doctor.
Yeah.
Guys.
And, I have some very intelligent friends. And it just really surprises me.
Yeah.
And even some that, I have a physician friend in the States and, the stuff that he would put out, I'm just like, okay, if that is your personal opinion, great on you.
But that's a really dangerous thing.
You are the mayor of your town and, all these other things as a physician or whatever.
You have a very predominant soapbox. You need to be careful.
Yeah. And again, if that's his opinion, that's how he feels, that's fine. But at least allow everyone else that's involved in this to have their own opinion on it because, there is, and again, I think what's happened in our world is we're confusing beliefs from facts.
Ding, ding, ding.
And because to some people, beliefs are so important and they become so much of who they are. Yeah. They allow their beliefs to become their identity.
And their facts that they base everything on.
Mm-hmm. And so they twist these beliefs into facts.
Yep.
And then if you fight those facts or those beliefs, you're attacking them personally.
And you're attacking their identity.
Because they've allowed those beliefs to become their identity.
Yeah.
And we need to get away from that.
Hugely.
And just realize that, those things, like the thing that frustrates them is because science develops and improves and changes constantly.
And it's in flux.
So they see all this indecision and change as, it's not real.
Yep.
And then, their beliefs, which never change and are constant.
And are steadfast and never let them down and never shake.
So then those become facts.
Yep.
When they're not facts.
At all. Not even close. And you could string any nonsense together and pull any random aged last name that has held a position of power and throw any ideas together and a couple Photoshop graphics, and suddenly you have this like massive conspiracy theory. Mm-hmm. And the fact that I can do that from my iPhone makes me really question all of it.
Yeah.
Question the validity of it. Yeah. And then you're kind of watching it, like everyone's getting that COVID fatigue, and because there's no answers kind of from leadership or the answers that we want from leadership.
Yeah, or fast enough or whatever, right?
Everybody's like desperately trying to lean into something else, and it's really dangerous.
Yeah. I really do think in the next 5 years, there will be a peak to social media.
I think so too.
Where particularly there will be so much faked stuff. Because now there's like the deep fake videos
totally
of people's faces and everything.
Yeah.
To a point where we will have so little trust in, Facebook and Instagram and all those things.
It's going to become like a tabloid almost.
Yeah. Well, people will be like, okay, most of this is garbage.
Yeah.
So, and it just causes problems. So I'm not going to have anything to do with it.
Yeah.
And I hope that's what happens, is that we just all pass on all of that. And either we make something better.
Yep.
Or we realize that we don't need that.
Yeah. I think I feel like social media has been the biggest blight to all of this, because I feel like we really lost the sense of community. We lost a sense of connection. And so we have this like false connection in a lot of ways that isn't, I don't want to call it bad or vilify it, because I do stay connected with my friends from around the world via social media, via that kind of stuff. But then there's this weird thing that's happened where we assume that we're like best friends with someone because we read their posts and we know tons of stuff about them, and we get a really weird sense of connection to people. And so if that person that we've put on a false pedestal spews something that's not necessarily true, then that can infiltrate us. And then we're really crappy to our neighbor.
Yeah.
Like we don't really have that kind of, we're not connected to what actually matters anymore. Like it's interesting to be in a position where you hold, I don't think I hold like esteem or clout or anything, but I think it's just the fact that I see so many people so often with the business, right? Like you have so many people who walk through the door that you start to get a really broad tapestry of the community. And when I think of our community, I think of just absolutely outstanding people. I have a really big sense of pride. But then if you go on to social media and you look at, some of the pages that represent our town, you're like, where the hell is this place? What is going on? And you would think it was like burning to the ground. Yeah. And I think it just really skews the reality in a really big way. And sometimes, especially around COVID stuff, when you're seeing things come out of other countries, you're like, is that actually true? Like, is that what's happening? And I feel like that's detrimental to all of our mental health for a lot of reasons. But then that false narrative and that kind of like blow up of what's happening is really dangerous, because then if something does happen, we're not going to believe it, and we're not going to sympathize to it, and we're not going to appreciate it. So I don't know. It's like we're all on this bizarre skew, and where we should be is the exact opposite of where we are, and the things we focus on are the things we shouldn't focus on. And I think that festers into a lot of what's kind of going on consciously. Yeah. It's like we took that rat race that was happening kind of 9 to 5 in these really monotonous office jobs, and then threw it on our phones and got super addicted to them. And now we're like, why is everybody struggling so much? It's like, oh, yeah, well.
Yeah, there's so many layers to what we've put ourselves in.
Yeah.
But, when I get frustrated about things like this and feel overwhelmed by them, I always try to look at the other side in that, we are in a better place
Totally.
as, humans,
Yep.
as, earthlings than we have ever been before. Mm-hmm. There is less crime.
Totally.
There is less war. There is less premature death.
There's less.
Everything we can think of, it has improved.
Yeah, there's less famine. There's less, global hunger. There's all these kind of really incredible things. But because we live in this sensationalist moment, it seems like we're going down. Like we're in the worst we've ever been. So it becomes that kind of like, man, we really need, we need to determine what media we get exposed to. I try really hard to do it with my daughters. Like, we have a no YouTube rule in our house for all of us. And they don't get access to stuff unless they're supervised. And even Zoom school was really hard on our daughter because she doesn't sit in front of a screen for a really long time. And like, my kids don't sit and watch TV. Like, they're kind of always up and going, and we're out in the garden and we're doing all that kind of stuff. And I feel like I have to justify that. I have a lot of people in my life who are like, oh, you're so mean. They're not allowed on an iPad. And when did that become normal? When did it become normal that, like, our kids are watching a screen 10 hours a day? And what is that going to do?
Exactly. We don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think it's helpful. I think, and again, everyone's going to find their different path or which works for their family.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to say that mine is right and yours is wrong.
Yeah. But as long as there's, enough balance of those things they need, they're going to be okay.
Agreed.
But I really hope, again, we move, away from those needs.
Yep.
And that we spend more time just being in the moment and, as a community celebrating the good things rather than everyone focusing on, because it's hard on both sides of the fence.
Totally.
Whether you're on the right or the left, you want change now.
Yeah.
Well, on the right, you want change back to things were. And on the left, you want change how things are going to be in 30 years.
Yeah.
And, I've been on both sides of that.
Yeah.
Being raised Mormon, I was on the far right, wanting to go back to the days when women couldn't vote. And
totally. What's suffrage? Let's go back to before then.
Yeah. Or, this point, another point when I was on the far left where we want
all of it.
Everything now because it's all possible. We have all the solutions. Let's do it all now.
Yeah.
But one thing that I continually remind myself of is that the way humanity works is it's like a pendulum.
I agree. I was just going to say
back and forth.
Yeah.
And it was started really high when it was dropped. Yeah. And it had these really wide swings.
Yeah.
And now those swings are getting narrower and narrower.
Yeah.
And we're going to less extremes over time. And some people are fighting that. And so they're 100%. Pushing to get more extreme to either end. But I
feel like collectively we're really trying. And I feel like because everybody experienced kind of this like global health crisis and food crisis and mental health crisis, I think our empathy is really going to come back around. I think we got a little self-centered there for a minute. And I really hope that that's where we end up. And I think there's always going to be the people who share that meme on social media that you're like, what? So, and I think we all need that crazy uncle in our lives because it keeps us knowing.
Yeah.
But I think the conversation is incredibly important. And I think kind of knowing where people are at is also really important.
Exactly. Like where you had that crazy uncle that would just say racist things every now and then.
Yeah.
They didn't really know how bad it was. And most of the time they're a good person.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think that's kind of the same with people's posts.
100%.
It's
that's
just
how
every once in a while there's these weird things that pop out and you're just like, really? Come on, that's not who you are.
Yeah, 100%.
And I've been there. I've posted some dumb shit over the years.
I feel like if you are of our age and got exposed to social media when we got exposed to it, you said some shock and awe stuff. Yeah. And I just feel like we went through a shock and awe phase when there wasn't a huge audience. And now I feel like other generations are experiencing it, but it's hyper-focused. So they kind of didn't get that leeway of like making those weird mistakes that make people uncomfortable. So now like your parents and your grandparents are saying crazy shit on the internet that we got away with at like 14 years old. And it's just a weird, it's a weird moment.
Yeah. I always tell the kids that if there were phones and YouTube and the internet when I was in high school, I would never, ever be able to get a job.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Oh, I'm real glad there wasn't a lot of screen capture back in the
day. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But the one thing I always remind myself, you know, when I'm dealing with people, because I see how much I've changed in my life.
Totally.
And I'm like, everyone can change.
100%.
You know, everyone can move a little bit more towards balance.
And I feel like the only way we can get forward is to allow people to change. And I feel like this flux that we've lived through, I hope that everyone can kind of like sit with it and realize that they survived chaos. They survived the unknown, and that you can get through the unknown, and you don't have to be so steadfast in your beliefs, in your, you know, your opinions can change. You can become more educated, and you can extend that to others. Because I think that's a huge part of the issue is, you know, like you said, you know, your beliefs become your identity. If you get so stuck in that you can't look past that, and you have to hold on to this ideology. And I guess like we can use race or religion as the example, right? Like you've got it in your head that black people are bad, but then you meet Ed, who's this super nice guy who picks up the garbage. He's got 3 kids. He's put them through college, outstanding family. And you're nice to them, but then go inside and you're like, I have to hate them because that's in my belief system. Your beliefs are failing you.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people right now who are having this bizarre life identity crisis, and they don't have something else to kind of attach to. So it's kind of that perfect storm.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like on my other podcast with my son, we were talking about morality.
Oh, yeah.
And how morality is completely separate from religion, and that it is something that evolves over time.
Yep.
And it often evolves, well, almost all the time, it evolves faster than religion. And whereas, you know, all religions said in their scripture that slavery was good.
Yeah.
And beating your wife was good.
100%.
And all of these things.
And sleeping with donkeys was totally kosher.
Yeah.
Like, there's some wild things in there.
Yes. And then over time, when our morality changed, we said, oh, well, that was a metaphor, or that didn't really happen. That was just, you know, and then we made all these apologies and excuses for those things when our humanity evolved with our morality, and we said, no, those things aren't cool. And we continue to do that to this day, and we're all meeting a little closer because of that. And that's why it's so important that, you know, we separate belief and fact and morality and all of that from this thing that's...
And I feel like having a scale, like, you know, you meet those people who, like you said, right, they read that scripture and at one point it was a literal translation for how they should live their life, and now it's an idea, a rough summary of this metaphor that was created 2,000 years ago. But somebody kneels at a football game and like cancel culture, burn the jersey, whole 9 yards. So why are we so forgiving and adapting of one, but then won't even consider the other? And I feel like the spectrum on that is really, really off kilter. And things that we can kind of turn a blind eye to on one side that are beyond terrible and truly horrific. But then, you know, a Kardashian says something stupid or wears a scandalous outfit, and like we're all up in arms. So I feel like And sometimes I feel like we use those things as escapism instead of actually addressing the real issue. And maybe there's something to that, right? Like it's a coping mechanism, or it's something that makes it a little easier, because sometimes when we start talking about these ideas, these are huge. This is the core shaping value of most of us. You know, most of us were taught from whatever book our family believed in, and that became our moral compass and our guide of the person we were going to become. And then we hit 16 and we're like, pfft, and now we have to find this new identity. And I feel like if that's happening to you later and later in life and things are changing around you, I feel like the crisis you experience is so much worse. And if you don't have that chance to kind of become who you need and want to be in your youth, you almost get stuck in a role. And so then these really minor things outside of the norm just throw you off. Yeah. And maybe that's...
you just described the, 20 years of my life.
Right. You're like, I know this story. I know this. No, it's and you see... I hate to kind of dog on them, but you see older men who are kind of going through this like alpha identity crisis. And I've met a lot of men over the age of 60 who are like, I'm a victim of being a white male. The white male's attacked, like, poor me. What a terrible time to be a white male. And you're like, no, it's just literally getting equalized. Yeah, like you're
like, still up there, buddy. Don't worry about it.
You still above everybody, but like other people are starting to come up as well and are starting to say like, maybe come down to our level. But it's this huge identity crisis, and it's like they can't cope with the change. And so then, you find them, you see that like, it's a true, honest to God identity crisis. And it's like, no, we're literally just saying, you can't say racist stuff. You need to treat people with respect and stop beating your wife. Like that's where we're at.
And really that shift would solve so many of our problems. There's a great documentary out there. I saw it on Netflix. It may still be on Netflix, but it's called The Mask We Live In.
Oh, I've never heard.
And it's all about toxic masculinity and how we don't allow young men to connect with, share, and express their emotions
at all,
and the damage it causes. All the mass shootings in the United States.
Always.
What's the common denominator?
Always young white males.
Yeah.
Or somebody who identifies in that like higher level male identity.
Yeah, and suicide rates among men are much higher because they don't feel they can express and deal with their emotions and get that support they need. And there's so many things within that cause other pressure on others and themselves because of that we're not addressing those issues. Yeah. But, the more we become aware of these things, then we can start to heal.
It's something... Can we talk about like sexy stuff?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, this is an explicit podcast.
All right, I'm here for it. So one thing that has always really bugged me is the fact that me, being a white female or just a female in general, I have always kind of been treated as a sex object. And something that's always been projected on me is sex with other women. Growing up, it was this like, why don't you make out with her? And there was that fantasy of like, and it almost became normalized of girls kiss girls and girls fool around with girls. But if two dudes did that, like if me as a woman said, oh, it'd be super hot if like you two made out, they would be like, gross. But it's normalized for women. Yeah. It's super, super normalized. And there's this kind of like forced sexuality in a lot of ways on young women, like teenage to young adult aged women of like, go kiss her kind of thing. But a male would never be afforded that experience. And like, it almost becomes, they have to be so straight, it's painful. And should they experiment in any way, then they're big old homos. Like, they don't have any gray area. And in a lot of ways, I feel like girls are afforded a lot more opportunity to explore their identity than men are. And I'm starting to notice, especially around our peer group and our friends, like my husband's very fit. He's very athletic. He works out a lot. And we went to a beach day and he took off his shirt and one of the other dads was like, oh, great, fit daddy's here. Like, now I don't feel comfortable to take my shirt off. And I was like, are you, like, I know that you're joking, but are you? Because
No,
I don't think you're joking. And I could see that he was having this, like, really hard time with it, with his own body image. And I was like, man, that was me at like 14. And I got to kind of live through that. And I had, you know, my sisterhood around me that lifted me up and told me I was beautiful and motherhood is beautiful and my body matters and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I got to put myself back together and find my identity within my own body. But we do not afford males the same privilege. They have to be strong and stoic and fit and groomed. But like, a girl wants to kiss a girl on a Saturday night when she's 16, she's not going to be labeled a lesbian her whole life. No. She's going to be a sex icon amongst her peers. Two dudes make out on a hockey trip and it's done.
They'll probably get kicked off the team.
100%.
Yeah.
So why do we afford one but not the other? And like, and especially when males have a higher sex drive, they have, you know, a greater desire to experiment with that. So what happens when we don't afford that? And when we force this like hyper masculine, hyper alpha kind of mentality on them, what are the ramifications of that? And do those ramifications impact young women?
Yeah. You need to watch that documentary.
Okay.
I made all three of my boys watch it.
Yeah. Good.
Many years ago.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know if it helped or what, but, you know, both of them came out,
Yeah.
you know, not too long after that. So,
Yeah.
you know, I have two gay sons and, you know, it's, whereas if I were, you know, 10 years earlier, I would have lost it.
100%.
If I was still in the Mormon church, I would have lost it. I would not know what to say. I would be really uncomfortable, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas once I let go of those things, then I'm like, all that matters is I love my child.
Yeah. And
not
that
what they do.
They're safe
Yeah.
and that they're happy and that they're loved. Like, that's all we can really want. Yeah. And I think it's so weird that that exists. Like, you're not allowed to question, you're not allowed to explore, you're not allowed to anything. Whereas, like, that is the epitome of porn.
Yeah.
Like, that whole ideology, right? So I just don't understand why we afford it to one gender and not to the other.
Yeah. If anyone looking for answers to that question, watch The Mask We Live In.
I'm going to add it to my list.
So one last question.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to, you know, anyone listening on how, you know, tools or things you would share that you find very, you know, effective for you to find balance and let go of some of that excess emotion?
I am not a doctor.
No one is here that I'm bringing in. I want to hear real people because that's what matters. If
I would
it works.
say a support group is a huge part of it, and having a connection to your community and feeling connection to another human. And it doesn't have to be, you know, a partner or a sibling or anything. Like, I recently became really good friends with somebody who's much, much older than me. She lives just down the road. We share a love of gardening. And I'm often so struck by how many things we have in common. And I've learned so much from her, working with her. We're working on a project together for the food bank. We've been writing a cookbook.
Yeah.
And just knowing her has benefited my life. And I consider her a part of my community. So, like, get out and do your best to connect with somebody so that you just feel more grounded to your home, and have a hobby and be able to admit when you're not okay and ask for help and get help, and never be afraid to burden somebody. And if somebody says that you're a burden, you don't need them.
Well, and I think, when we're in that state, this is the ultimate test of connection and friendship.
Totally.
Because never be afraid to talk to someone about when you're hurting.
Totally.
Because if they abandon you and if they can't handle it, they're not your real friend.
Absolutely.
And you're wasting,
and it's
a lot of energy and stress on someone that isn't going to be there for you.
Absolutely. And it's okay to break up with people.
Yeah.
We don't just break up with our partners. You don't have to stay friends. You are allowed to have opinions. You are allowed to be a spicy personality. And when you are a spicy personality, you will piss a lot of people off. Yeah. And that's okay. They're allowed to not like you in the same way that you're allowed to not like them. And just be authentically you, because that's when you will feel the best.
Yeah. I love that. And I think to feel authentic, you need to act authentic.
I agree.
And you need to stop worrying about what everyone else is thinking.
Absolutely. And it's okay to turn your phone off. And it's okay to go to the mountains and just decompress. And we don't have to always be constantly living in a state of go. We can just sit and we can have a minute. Truthfully, the COVID shutdown was the first time in forever, other than giving birth, that I actually did nothing and that there wasn't 400 things to do. And I realized how much I actually need that. So just take a minute, take a beat, and just reflect.
Yeah. It's one of the things I always recommend to patients when they ask me, what else can I do?
Yeah.
And I don't give them a big list, because if you give someone too much, they don't do anything.
Absolutely.
But I think one of the most important things we can all do is 20 minutes a day of doing nothing.
Yeah.
And that's not, 20 minutes of watching TV, 20 minutes of watching video, or 20 minutes of, your mind is in the moment for 20 minutes. And it's going to be work, and it's going to be difficult.
Yep.
But the benefit you're going to get from that is
astronomical. Yeah, there is actually, I can't remember which study it is, but there's a whole study about how meditation, even just 5 minutes a day, has huge impacts on the cardiovascular system and mental health issues and all of these things. Just 5 minutes. And then if you increase it kind of steadily within that, and you kind of think, what would happen if doctors started diagnosing meditation and physical activity instead of drugs?
Well, so in the UK, probably almost 10 years ago now, they had a huge study that they'd done with everyone within the UK and within the system for mild to moderate depression. And what they found is that, drugs like Prozac and all these other things don't work very effectively, as far as improvements in outcomes for those that are mild to moderate.
Yeah.
Those with extreme
severe,
anxiety and depression, meds help a lot.
Yeah.
But for those people in those first two stages, it didn't really make that much of a difference, and it just caused other side effects and other problems.
Yep.
What they found is, so now instead of prescribing those drugs for those first two stages, they prescribe counseling.
Yep.
So it's taken care of, so they can go get counseling. Exercise, all these other things. Yeah. We're really pushing for a national drug program in Canada. The NDP is and everything like that. And I'm like, can we get a national counseling program?
And physical therapy and, rehab recovery,
Dentist.
not dentists. Yeah, no kidding. Not painkillers. Wouldn't it be amazing if you hurt your knee and you went to a doctor who could strengthen the muscles to repair the damage to your knee instead of a bunch of painkillers that made you hurt your knee more? Yeah. Stuff like that. Yeah.
We have all the answers, Michelle.
I know. 4 times in the last 2 weeks, people have been like, "You're running for town council?" I'm like, nope.
Yeah. I've ran for town council before.
Did you really?
And I also ran for federal government. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
And I've been asked several times since to do that for different parties or for other things. But I made a decision several years back that there's enough white men in politics.
Fair.
And so I've decided I will never run for politics again.
I feel a like, I feel like there is a place for the alt-white man, because I feel like it's kind of that, use that thing that you have that's an advantage and then turn it on its head.
Yeah. Well, if there's any women out there with similar, ideas that isn't interested in that, I would back them up and be out there throwing as much towards their corners as I could. Because I think that's what we need more of.
I agree.
And, again, I've said this before, COVID has taught us something that, those countries that succeeded the most and did the best dealing with COVID all had women as leaders.
Yeah, killing it.
They just have a different perspective.
The boys are not doing so well.
No, because unfortunately they're stuck in a different mindset.
Yeah.
And with anything we've learned, that the more voices that have a say in how things are done, the more balanced and more effective it is. And we need more female, more immigrant, more First Nations. Yeah, we need more of that.
We need a little less Wonder Bread, a little more multigrain.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that scares some people because they're like, but their ideas and their beliefs and things are different than mine, and I feel a little threatened.
100%.
And I'm like, one thing to remember is that everyone that comes to Canada in particular wants to be a Canadian.
Yeah.
And they are going to, do their best to make Canada better. Yeah. They're not trying to make Sharia law or all this other bullshit that people are throwing out there.
They're getting away from.
They're leaving that because they want progressive, yes, they may still love their religion and still want to practice it.
Yep.
But outside of that, they want their communities balanced.
And I'm so tired of the their religion. Homie, let's look at your religion here for a hot
look what yours has done over the last couple thousand years.
They all got some demons.
Yeah.
They all got some bad guys. Yeah. I think it's a really, we need that. And I feel like we'd all really benefit from just looking outside the current box that we have. But it's that kind of classic atonement. If we actually start talking to Indigenous people, we have to give them things back.
Yeah.
And we have to put the cookies back in the cookie jar, and nobody wants to do that.
Now, everyone's afraid of losing what they have. And, but we have to get away from that. We have to be open to wherever it's going to go, whatever is a little more balanced and right. And
not be afraid. The one thing that's driving me nuts politically is the fear. People are afraid to make a decision in a lot of moments, especially with mask laws or COVID restrictions or all that kind of stuff. They're so afraid that they're going to get dragged on social media that they're not making decisions and choices. I feel like we need a lot more people who will look at it and make the best decision for the most amount of people instead of bowing down. Yeah. Because we're not going anywhere.
Yeah. I've always said I want a scientocracy. So not a democracy, but a scientocracy. So our decisions are based off research and science and social science and what's there.
That's too logical.
Yeah. So that we're making decisions that are based off what makes humans better and our community better rather than what, this one little group wants. Yeah. And the thing is that's going to upset everyone.
Yeah.
I'd rather have everyone a little upset and us moving forward than, because I don't think one side should get everything they want.
I agree.
Because that's not balanced either.
Yeah.
So, but would you have any idea that we've been talking for an hour and 45 minutes?
No.
Yeah.
Go us.
So this is the longest podcast episode. I apologize to everyone. But it's been really engaging.
It has been. This has been a great conversation.
I always had a feeling that you and I we're connected on a lot of those topics, and we haven't really gotten into a lot of this stuff with a lot of people.
Yeah.
But I still think this stuff is important because I do think these big picture stuff have a big effect on our mental health.
I think it's huge. I think we so often assume that mental health is our problem, that it's this internalized thing that we struggle with and we have to fix. But there's an insane amount of elements that go into that whole identity. An interaction that you have with a stranger can impact you for the day. Something that you witness on the side of the road can impact you. So there's all these kind of outside elements. Yeah. And then we're living through something most of us have never seen before under a hyper-focused lens. So
Yeah, and there really is, just as we, know and can see that there's systematic racism, there is like this systematic control system that causes
all
a
of
lot
it.
of our anxiety, depression.
Yeah.
And as we make changes to, make our life a little more balanced and complete and connected and take away those things that get in the way, we will find a lot more peace and balance in our lives.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm hopeful. Like, I think our kids and those generations are going to be pretty dope. Like, I think you're even seeing it with young boys who they aren't expected to be this thing anymore, and like they're comfortable to wear a tight shirt and have some buttons undone and wear some necklaces and paint their nails, and you're like, yes, I am here for this.
Yeah, it's like I think I've said this on the podcast before, but my son, when he was 10 or 12, he'd come out to me one day and he said to me, "Dad, I'm what is it? I can't even remember the term now, but he's pansexual." And I was, of course, me being an old guy, I'm like,
what the hell is that?
Yeah, exactly. And he's like, "Oh, it means I just love whoever I will love. I'm not going to not allow myself to fall in love with someone because they're gay or straight or transgendered."
Yep.
And this is 12. Yeah. And I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of cool, buddy." And he goes, and so we started talking about it, and he goes, "Dad, in 10 years, no one's going to care about gender.
Yeah.
No one's going to talk about it anymore." Because he says, "We'll just love whoever we love."
Wouldn't that be
and
so
we're not
nice?
going to judge it. And I was just like, this is 12.
Yeah.
And I do have a lot of faith and hope that we've got more and more people that are coming up that have a much more balanced approach and, want to just see all of us succeed.
Absolutely.
And be happy.
And I like, it's time for a little civil unrest. Let's shift some stuff up and
Yeah. We get all upset about riots for black rights, but if Vancouver wins the Stanley Cup or
we'll burn
that let's burn the city down, and no one's going to freak out about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I what was it? Something was like this town had $100,000 in damage from a Black Lives protest, but then the cops, it was $100,000. No, it was It was New York. And they were like, yeah, there was $100,000 in damage from this Black Lives protest. And someone was like, in 2018, they paid like $218 million to settle wrongful death suits.
Yeah.
In these communities, like kind of a drop in the bucket when we start thinking about it.
Exactly. I'm just like, it needs to happen. Yes, you want it as safe as we possibly can make it, but, don't freak out about a couple, few burned down buildings or whatever when these are lives we're talking about.
Like, you pulled out your AK to get a haircut.
Yeah. And no one arrested them.
You were willing to kill someone so you could go to the barber shop.
Yeah.
But, like, we don't want somebody to be wrongfully murdered in the street. And you're mad that a window got smashed? Like, can we talk about that scale?
Yeah. Here we go. Michelle, we're going to be here all night.
I know.
All right. Well, again, I think we touched on some really important things here tonight. And looking at the bigger picture of, things above us that are pushing us down and being that heavy weight on our mental health. But yet at the same time, we have a lot of power and responsibility to try to find balance and to get all the connections and supports we can to get us through this, because we can't control that bigger picture. We can influence it and we can try to make change.
Or we can burn it to the ground, you guys.
Okay, let's hope the police don't listen to this.
Awkward. They know where I live.
Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you
for your time.
This has been really fun.
It has been a lot of fun. And again, our goal out of all this is that these real conversations can connect us to real people again and real tools to find balance and find peace. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, that was fascinating, wasn't it? I think it was one of the most engaging ones I've had so far, and particularly focused on things that I'm really, into. A lot of the political stuff that we don't talk about often enough and their relationship to our mental health. When we are stressed out, there's the internal stuff that we can deal with, changing how we approach our thoughts and making sure we're balanced internally. But then that other aspect is the mechanisms and systems around us that affect our health. Our communities have changed so much. Our workplaces have changed so much, and we no longer feel we have meaningful work that we actually make a difference and change things. And that affects us in so many ways. So I really do think this was a really good discussion. We talked far longer than I anticipated. So anyone who got through, I'm really proud of you. Well done. And we're going to have Michelle back again, because our discussion continued a little bit after we turned off the cameras and stuff. And we need to talk more about some of the things that happened in her childhood and how she overcame that and all the craziness around that. So we will invite her back on again in a future date. And that one will be a really fascinating discussion, because I am blown away by how balanced and strong of a woman she is with her past. I know we didn't get into it in this one, but we will again. And I think you'll be really blown away by the things that she's been through in her life. It's been a really interesting conversation, because we've learned so much about how we, all those external things that we don't have a whole lot of control over that affect our mental health. But that, obviously just from our discussion, you can see there's a lot of emotion behind that, and a lot of, frustration and anger. And with anger is always caused by injustice, or when something is unfair. And within the 5 elements of letting go, we talk about how to release all those extreme emotions, and particularly with anger. It's not about getting angry or repressing anger. The middle path, the synergistic expression for anger, is self-assertion. And this is standing up for yourself. And you may not be able to get the change you want. You can't force anything, but it's about getting your voice heard and expressing that in a balanced way. And there's a lot of organizations out there in the world that do something about it. Mothers Against Drunk Driving, MAD, the suffragettes, all these movements that we're seeing happen right now, Black Lives Matter. These are people that are so frustrated by the injustice in the world that they're using that energy to get shit done. And it's about channeling that anger into nonviolent action. And that's what gets it done. And yes, there's other things happening out there. There is some destruction, but hey, like we said in our podcast, people loot and riot in the streets over sports games. And we only talk about that for a couple of days. So sometimes things have to get shooken up to get change. And unfortunately, in the hierarchy we have in our world, this is a very common thing. And we need to get over it as a people and support one another through it. So I really enjoyed tonight's discussion, and I'm excited to have her back again. Thank you for listening. This was a really fun discussion, and I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for listening and encouraging me further to continue this, because it has been a lot of fun, and I do believe these discussions can help our community in many ways. And it just gets us talking more about mental health and connecting as a community. And these are things we desperately need at this time to help us heal. So thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of The 5 Elements of Letting Go. Thank you.